All right, everyone, it's all hands on deck. We absolutely must win the Senate race in Georgia for Raphael Warnock for a long list of reasons. Number one, Reverend Warnock is a good human being, and we need more people like him in the Senate to set the standard of the type of public officials we want. He's a decent, empathetic, wonderful person. Number two, a clean 51% majority in the Senate gives democracy, gives the Democrats, the closest thing we have to people actually fighting for good governance at the moment, a stronger hand in negotiating with ruthless Mitch McConnell, ruthless Manchin and Sinema. The Dems don't have to power share on this committee, and it streamlines the whole process of pushing in these judges that we need to balance out the court packing by McConnell and Trump, which saw 30% of our courts taken over by these ideologue Federalist Society judges. The third reason why we need Reverend Warnock to be elected, and this is extremely urgent, the Senate map for Democrats in 2024 is going to be extremely tough. That is why we need to bank as many Democratic senators as we can now this year. So we absolutely must get Reverend Warnock in there. And obviously the final reason is who wants to deal with 6 years of Herschel Walker? So join us for these two extremely urgent, all hands on deck phone banks for Georgia. Thursday, December 1st, 6 p.m. Eastern. That's Thursday, December 1st, 6 p.m. Eastern. And then the final one is Election Eve, Monday, December 5th, 5 p.m. Eastern. Monday, December 5th, 5 p.m. Eastern. You can RSVP for each of these events. Come join us, hang out on Zoom. At each one, we're going to select a volunteer to get a signed copy of Sarah's latest book, They Knew, and a Mr. Jones film poster. Do not miss it. Again, all hands on deck for Reverend Warnock in Georgia. We must win this race. Thank you. See you soon. Welcome to this special gratitude holiday themed episode of Gaslit Nation. The one source of reliable happiness in life, if you look at the scientific studies, they say again and again, it is our relationships. It's not how much money we have, how much power we have, the car we drive, but it is our relationships. And I want to pay tribute to a friend of the show, a wonderful, brilliant artist that I've had the immense privilege and joy to watch bloom in her career from a stand-up comic in the world of Louis C.K., a stand-up comic in New York City, to writing, producing for some of the hit comedy shows out there, The Daily Show, writing for Letterman. And she goes on to beat me in being nominated for an Oscar for her role in writing this screenplay for Borat 2, which was a work of genius because it exposed the president of the United States lawyer at the time, Rudy Giuliani, where he was trying to get down with the actress who we thought was Borat's news reporter, like the 60 Minutes of Bulgaria. I don't know. But I'm talking about the one and only Jena Friedman, who has a comedy special on Peacock, which everyone should watch. I got to see it live in Brooklyn. It was a packed house. If you love Gaslit Nation, you will love her comedy special. And also a show out now. Again, it's Gaslit Nation spirited, called True Crime. Am I saying all the names of your stuff right?
It's called, well, the show is particular. First of all, thank you so much. I love you very much. The show is called True Crime Story Indefensible. It's part of this true crime thing that AMC Plus, which is the streamer for Sundance Channel, I can't keep up myself. It's part of their true crime initiative. I don't know, but it's not fully true crime. It's kind of more social justice-y, slightly comedic, but also heartbreaking and sad. Slight true crime.
She pulls back the curtain on the, you know how we're always saying on Gaslit Nation, corruption is an industry. So she looks at the true crime aspect of the corruption industry, how people literally get away with murder. Like I watched her Casey Anthony's episode in this series, and it's dark, hilarious, and eye-popping. And then tell us the name of your stand-up special. You can see how
You
well
got it.
prepared
Lady Killer.
Lady
You
Killer.
got it.
Okay.
Lady Killer. Yeah, yeah. And the true crime show, it looks at the criminal legal system, which is a system that we talk about, but we don't really look at under a microscope. And it kind of looks at different aspects of it, starting with cases. And then we broaden out. I like to say that it's like using true crime as a Trojan horse to get women to give a shit about. And a lot of women do, but I actually had some Trump supporters from season 1 message me about how much they liked the show. And it made me really excited because I didn't think I would ever be able to connect to people who support, or at least at the time did support Trump. But I think true crime is like this weird Trojan horse where you can kind of connect to people and be like, hey, if you're concerned with violence against women, maybe vote for different people.
Exactly. So all the white women that keep voting for Republicans.
It's basically white women,
right.
catnip. True crime is catnip for white women.
It's like they fear being killed by a man like every other average woman, but they just can't help themselves with who they vote for. So tell us about your Wisconsin.
So the episode that aired last week, November 17th, is a story about a woman. It takes place in Wisconsin. She was a pregnant person in Wisconsin who had done drugs, illegal substances early in her pregnancy. At the time, she still could have gotten an abortion if she wanted to, but she wanted to keep the child. She found out she was pregnant, and so she went to the doctor for prenatal care. She told the doctor, she disclosed what drugs she had done and when she had done them. She wasn't a heavy drug user, not that it matters, but she just wanted to be careful and make sure that her pregnancy was going to be okay. And the doctor violated the patient doctor confidentiality and told the hospital, who then took her in custody and appointed a lawyer for her fetus, whereas she didn't have a lawyer. And they basically put her in jail because she refused to go to treatment. And she refused to go to treatment because she was afraid they were going to take away her future child if she admitted to having a problem. And so she ended up in jail, and then she ended up in solitary. And then she got out a couple weeks later. She's pregnant, by the way. She was, I think, 14 or 18 weeks pregnant at the time this was happening. She could have not gone to jail if she had gotten an abortion. But again, because she wanted to keep the child, she was in violation of this act called Act 292, the Wisconsin Unborn Child Protection Act, which I think is still in effect today. And it basically gives the state the authority to imprison or to punish any pregnant person the state deems in violation of unborn child protection, whatever that means. It's intentionally vague. It was written by a lot of dudes who have no idea what it means to be pregnant. And it's just reflective of laws in many other states in this current moment where fetal personhood is gaining traction and laws are reflecting that.
Yeah. I mean, Wisconsin, so we've lost Missouri. Missouri used to be a bellwether state. We've lost Ohio. Ohio used to be a bellwether state, and we're losing Wisconsin to the Republican autocracy, which is really based on this law that you're describing. The Republican Party has been operating like a Catholic parochial school where like the priests and the nuns beat the hell out of you because it's for your own good. And then, they throw you in solitary confinement because it's for your own good. And it's just, we have this extreme Catholicism as we see taking over the Supreme Court, where the majority of judges are Catholics. And of course, on the far right, they are on the court. And they overturned Roe. What was that like for you being pregnant, working on that story? Like you told me the story about how you needed to catch a flight in Ohio, and being pregnant, driving on the road, you're just thinking, God, if something should happen to me, if I need medical care as a pregnant woman in Ohio, what a nightmare that would be.
Yeah, well, I mean, as a pregnant person, you have very little power and control. We were launching into season 2 of Indefensible, and I was only like 6 weeks pregnant. I was too early to tell anyone that I was pregnant, but I think we were in a development meeting and I just let it slip to the network. Hey, I'm pregnant, which means I really want to greenlight this story because I don't know if they would have felt comfortable greenlighting a story like that if I hadn't been pregnant, because it's, you know how networks are. And this is all before Roe was overturned. And so we were working on this story because I saw, as you did too, anyone since 2000, I think 10 or earlier, anyone in this space could see that Roe was going to be overturned. And it didn't even need to be in so many states because the laws have just been so restrictive and punitive to the point where prior to Roe being overturned, it was virtually impossible for so many people to get access to reproductive health care in so many states in America. So the one silver lining on a side note is that it's all out there now and it's so clear and people are actually responding at the ballot box. Whereas a year ago, people didn't really take us seriously and they didn't really think about how these laws were actually impacting people. Now, the Unborn Child Protection Act in Wisconsin has been around, I want to say 95, maybe later. I don't exactly know the date. I could find it for you, but it's been around for a while and a lot of these laws have. And one of the most insidious things about it is that when it goes into effect, so Tammy Leisure, who we talk about in our episode, her trial, if you will, she didn't have an attorney, the fetus did. That took place behind closed doors because of like juvenile court, blah, blah, blah. So reporters don't even really know the extent to which people are targets. And it's not all women, it's vulnerable women, women who have used drugs, women who just find themselves in more vulnerable situations. There's a lot of shame also associated with, hey, I smoked pot early in my pregnancy, or I did this drug, and they don't want people to know. So it makes it harder for them to advocate for themselves. And yeah, I mean, there are laws like this in every state, which is crazy. I can go on a little tangent, but when I used to work at The Daily Show, I really wanted to get like a story about abortion on the air. And every week there was a different crazy piece. And I would pitch something to John and he'd be like, no, 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 no.
Jon Stewart?
Well, just because it's a tough issue. And I think in 2013, 14, 15, the general consensus among, a lot of male comedians, and I talk about this in my forthcoming book. I do talk about my attempts at like doing abortion comedy over the years. I think until now, people really haven't been, and by people I mean men, galvanized to really speak out about it because it was so taboo and not really, like Biden up until this year was afraid to say the A word, like men, I think a lot of progressive men just have been afraid to attack this issue head on. And it's also partly how we ended up in the situation that we're in and with the laws that we have, because men are not making it their business when it is very much their business in the sense of helping it not be the state's business.
Exactly.
I'm contradicting myself. I'm like, it's men's business, not our bodies, but the laws around our bodies. Got that, everyone? But I remember there was one piece where it was so egregious that John gave us a green light, but it was about a bill in Alabama that gave, again, about fetus lawyers. It gave state funds to fetus lawyers to, if a teen wanted to get an abortion and she didn't have parental consent in Alabama, she could go to a judge and get a judicial bypass. But now the state was actually allocating funds from their public defender system, which was already underfunded, to these things called guardian ad litems, which are essentially fetus lawyers. So if the teen wanted an abortion and the judge deemed her mature enough to get an abortion, as opposed to have a child, the state could then assign a lawyer for the fetus. And the fetus lawyer could put the teen on trial and put her parents on trial, her boyfriend's parents, her pastor, her basketball coach, and then run out the clock. I mean, and that's how the joke is, like, that's how babies are made in Alabama. I mean, it was a horrible piece of legislation and we had a field day with it. Jessica Williams was a correspondent and we sat down with a fetus lawyer and we trolled the shit out of him. But it's just so eerie that that actually was a law that existed. And so this is an extension of that. It's less comedic because it's actually about a person's story as opposed to just the law. But it's in the same vein of all of these sneaky, I say like the brightest minds in the Republican Party, which I know isn't saying a lot, but the brightest minds in that party are working in this type of personhood legislation because they're so creative and they've achieved so much progress. Not the right word, but they've just, what is the word? Anti-progress?
Victories. Far-right victories.
In this one area, to the point where, yeah, Roe obviously was overturned and it was a long time coming, but it obviously happened and it's been a long time coming, I guess.
Yeah. Trump is the evangelicals' perfect vessel. Now, Ron DeSantis, who also wants to ban abortion, he is releasing all these, I am God, I am the chosen one, I am the new Christ Messiah videos, where he's trying to get that evangelical vote and be their imperfect vehicle to pack the courts and further this war on women and victories for white male patriarchy. What do you think is ultimately, because this has been going on, like you said, under our noses for so long, what do you think has been driving this?
It's just control. Women used to be property, particularly women of color. And so it's just men wanting to control women and vulnerable people, anyone with a uterus. I think that's really when you distill it down to what it is. We know it's not pro-life. We can't let them call themselves pro-life. They're not pro-birth. They're not pro-maternal fetal health. It's just about control. You can take it a step further and be like, blame religion, like Mary didn't need to get pregnant to have a baby. Why do you? But I think on just a basic level, they just want to be able to control women and take away our power.
Exactly right. That's what it's all about. And unfortunately, like you point out, the male allies that we need to win this, to fight it, to wage it, to talk about it, and have the words to talk about it, have the language. Why do you think they feel so squeamish over it?
I think it's seen as women's health. It's not seen as an economic issue.
It's seen like a period commercial, like a tampon commercial. They're like, change the channel.
It's just the framing too. I mean, reproductive autonomy, it's a human rights issue. It's an economic issue. It's a climate issue. It's everything. And so the fact that we relegate it to like this weird subset of like women's subset. I'm so fucking tired. I have a 1-month-old at home. It was just relegated to this like obscure, like women's health. I mean, I could go on a whole rant about like our like disconnected late stage capitalist hellhole, but we don't see things in terms of like communities and public health. Unfortunately, a lot like the women's bodies suffer because of it.
Yeah. So you just raised something, and I want to just clear this up for our audience. So Jena is technically on maternity leave, and I agreed to
There's no such thing in America, and not
so
for a freelancer.
That is 1,000,000,000% true. So she reached out to me to come on the show because we wanted her on the show for a very long time now, because of what she does. It's right up our alley, and also because it's gratitude themed. This episode in 2016, when Trump stole the presidential election with the help of the Kremlin, right? There's a 400-page Mueller report about this. Sarah and I met during that time of darkness. We just joined forces right away. And immediately, the very first person who had any sort of cultural standing, a big following on Twitter, doing interviews about the various comedy shows that she was putting on and all that, was Jena Friedman. I remember reading some interview with you that you posted in like some hipster magazine. I don't remember which one, where they asked you, they're like, who are you following on Twitter? What are your news sources? And this is at a time when like the Kremlin and Jared Kushner's Observer were all writing hit pieces on us. And the idiots on the far left thought that Sarah and I were just creating excuses for why Hillary neoliberal shill won, And you came out and you're like, I'm following Sarah Kendzior and Andrea Chalupa. I think they're great. Everyone should follow them. Code Red. Like, you were like one of the very, 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 very first. And that was really wonderful boost of encouragement that you gave us during that time.
Well, you guys were totally right on. And even like, I remember when your podcast started, and I think you and I connecting on social media because it was around like either December 2015 or something when the trolls really started to come out. I tweeted something I thought was pretty benign about how like a divided left will make way for fascism.
Which is true.
Weimar Republic, Germany. And I got so trolled. And then there were these comics like Jimmy Dore early on who just came out. And
who's like the Tucker Carlson of the internet.
And I didn't see it coming back then. I remember I emailed him. He was like trolling me over something. I had a Bernie supporter in an audience at a show I did in London. And the guy just kind of heckled me. And then online, after the show, I just kind of said like, so typical Bernie bro, like coming to your show and like yelling at you for blah, blah, blah. I don't even know what I said, but it like lit the far left internet on fire because I was like, and then they're like, this wasn't a real, she never performed. She's a Hillary show. Like it was just went crazy. And I emailed Jimmy or something. I DM'd him. I'm like, comic to comic, like what? And I shouldn't have said it like that, but I just thought that comedians it was at a naive time when I thought that like being a comedian was a more prominent identity than being political. And this is like how naive I was. And he just took that and ran with it. And I don't think I saw it coming, like the economy for far left and far right provocateurs that emerged around 2014, 2015. Going to go on a tiny little rant, but I don't know if you remember the show Redacted Tonight.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
a comedy show on RT. Lee Camp, who lovely guy that I used to know.
Yeah, he was at HuffPost. He was like a comedy guy that was always on HuffPost doing political comedy.
So he got an opportunity to do this kind of like left of center daily show, whatever that means, for RT. And I was working at the Daily Show.
RT, Russia Today, yes. Kremlin, blood money funded propaganda, which laid the groundwork for the genocide in Ukraine by dehumanizing Ukrainians. Go on.
Yeah. But I remember somebody reached out to me to see if I wanted to audition to be a correspondent or something on that show. And I was happily at the Daily Show field producing. But I remember thinking, and I think it was around the time when John Oliver and this producer, Brennan Schroff, actually went over to Russia to interview Snowden. And they came back with all these like crazy stories. This is maybe 2014.
John Oliver just did a scathing interview to Ed Snowden's face, which revealed what an egomaniac that guy basically is. But go on.
Yeah, this one I don't think he was like mean to Snowden then.
But it was like a John Oliver gentle touch of basically
But it was interesting. And they came back and they told us all these like crazy stories about the production and everything. And then so I told my friend, I was like, okay, RT, isn't that funded by the Kremlin? And he's like, we're allowed to talk about anything. And and then I was like, well, what about Putin? And he's like, well, anything but Putin, So I thought that was so interesting. And then I saw that show it never achieved like a hugely popular status, but it was like 2014 and then 2015 and RT started like advertising around New York and just raising their profile. And then I don't know when you and I first connected, but I was getting trolled on social media. And I think we were talking about it because I know everything was going on with your sister. You were telling me. It's just so interesting how it all kind of played out. And then when you and Sarah started the podcast, it was just a breath of fresh air. And it was crazy how people just didn't take what you were saying seriously when it was like exactly what was happening and exactly what has played out to happen.
Yeah, that's why this show is called Gaslit Nation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that in real time watching the whole RT talent pool, if you will, like the whole RT troll class or whatever coming after you hardcore just for making some like you said, some benign tweet, and they just were like bullying you. And this was very early on. And I think obviously the hell we've all gone through with Trump and just seeing the Kremlin's victory dances during all of Trump's time in office, which ranged from like a long list of things, right, that we all sort of went through, like massive Pearl Harbor level cyber attacks against the US in the middle of a pandemic, attacking hospitals and so on. It's just a long list. And I think Americans were initiated into a club of people who have experienced firsthand what Kremlin aggression is like and how insidious it can be. And I think that really has not fully gotten rid of the RT trolls, but it's definitely taken away some of their power. Enough people are fed up with Russia. And of course, the war in Ukraine has united more than divided people. We're all sort of rallying around like a good versus evil battle to define the soul of the world, not just our country. So do you feel like it's let up from what it used to be?
I mean, I was never getting trolled on social media is not. It can be frustrating. I mean, you definitely get like scary DMs. You have people sending you like photos of an AR-15 and like you're a performer who puts your tour dates on your social media. So it is a little scary, but it's nothing compared to, actual Russian aggression. But I do think it went from feeling like, am I crazy that this is going on? Like that on an RT blog, my name is listed. Like, why are they even, I'm so small potatoes. What's going on? Like, from that to actually seeing everything playing out the way that it's playing out. I mean, it's all horrible. I think it just went from thinking that you're crazy to knowing that you're not crazy. That's all. And I do think like, at least on social media, I don't want to talk about Twitter now because of the whole Elon Musk thing, but I think in the past year or two, it has gotten a lot better. The peak frustration for me was around 2015, 2016. I also was on Colbert's election night show. I don't know if you remember that, where I got into a little bit of trouble because he was like, hey, we were live on air when Trump, quote unquote, won. And my reaction was caught in real time. And Stephen looked at me and he was like, what do you think? And I said, did you see this?
No.
Oh, I'll send it to you. I was just said, I mean, it'd be funnier for you to see it, but I was just, my whole thing was like, don't cry in front of your coworkers. Like, I was like, don't cry. But I said, get your abortions now because we're going to be fucked and we're going to have to live with it.
Wow.
And I said that live. It was airing on Showtime, and then Stephen made a joke about it. But I still get trolled for that comment. But it was just, I think the internet trollery of that reached its peak around 2015, 2016. And now it's bled into reality. Like, you're seeing Russian aggression.
Yeah, I mean, it was always laying the groundwork to bring someone like Trump to power, to normalize, because trolling is bullying. It's normalizing bullying. It's like normalizing cruelty for the sake of cruelty. And that laid the groundwork for Trump to come to power. And then the Kremlin needed Trump in power in order to seize Ukraine, which, they're nothing without. There's that saying in foreign policy where Russia with Ukraine is the Soviet Union. Russia without Ukraine is like Canada. So I want to talk about, like, we're living in a time of mass trauma. We've all been impacted by it. There's nowhere to hide. We've seen Generation Z completely pissed off and with pitchforks and torches go to the ballot box, and they're going to be running for office increasingly because we're fucking up their world. And like the Nancy Pelosi's at the very top aren't doing, aren't serving quality of life issues, standing up to the climate crisis and so on. So the anxiety level is very high right now. How do you find in this atmosphere, this very charged time, where does comedy come in for you? Like what is the role of what you do, and how do you go about doing it, especially when so many people feel really like shaken up inside?
At least with my stand-up, a lot of my stand-up is like, you're not crazy. It's like preaching to my small demographic of people who give a shit about my comedy, just telling them that they're not crazy with jokes. That's a lot of my stand-up. With the true crime show, I think it's reaching a little bit of a broader swath of people. I know a lot of comedians after the 2016 election were like, how do we reach out to the other side? How do we cross over? How do we, and I think it sometimes you don't have to. Sometimes you just go even further into your bubble and you tell those people, hey, you're not crazy. Here's what's going on, and you're not alone. And there's power to people, especially people who are activists, who are working their asses off, who are exhausted and demoralized. If you can give them a little bit of reprieve with some jokes, I think that, or just some comedy, I think that that's always helpful. When I was at the Daily Show, there were segments that we did that I really do feel like impacted people in a positive way. There was one segment on voting rights, which is laughable now given what has happened, but it was a segment that I did with Asif Mamvi that was actually cited in a court case in 2013 or 14 to overturn racist voter ID laws. But those laws are back now. But this is in North Carolina. And so I do think, especially with those Daily Show pieces, if you could be like, here's why voter ID laws are racist, and you can show people in a funny way. And John Lewis was actually in that piece. It went viral. It was a pretty powerful piece. You're helping people understand issues that kind of seem complicated, but distilling them down to their essence and using comedy to do that. I think comedy can be really powerful that way. With the true crime show, I'm trying to do that with the criminal legal system. We had an episode about rough sex defenses, or otherwise known as the consent defense, which is legal in the US, but not in the UK. And it's basically, if typically they manifest, if like a guy kills a woman, he could say, oh, his defense could be, oh, we were having sex and I strangled her accidentally. And that's how that would manifest in court. And when a defense attorney uses that defense, it will sometimes result in a reduced sentence or an exoneration of the defendant. And so we did a story last season about how those defenses are bullshit and no one consents to die, and you don't accidentally ever strangle someone during sex. So comedy can be used to like engage people in issues that they wouldn't really be thinking about, and raise awareness and kind of give people the language and kind of tools to understand certain things that they could maybe mobilize against.
How do you go about writing your jokes? Do you sit down with a pad and paper, go, I'm writing jokes today? Or is it like, are you just capturing your inner monologue when something occurs to you, just you rush and write it down?
It depends. I write a lot when I'm on stage. So if I'm in New York and I do like I'm doing like a bunch of shows a night. I'll like tape my sets and write jokes and work out jokes in between shows. In LA, I'm not really as disciplined in terms of stand-up. When I did the stand-up special that I just taped, that was tricky because I was pregnant during COVID. So I was trying not to do indoor shows. And I wrote a special that was like changing as I was changing with the pregnancy. And so some of the jokes, there are a couple lines in the special that, did you come to the 7 o'clock or the 9 o'clock show?
The 7 one in Brooklyn.
Okay. So the 7 o'clock show, the 9 o'clock was actually, I don't know how that show was like an hour and a half, but the 9 o'clock show was a better show. But the 7 o'clock,
probably.
I don't know how to say it, but it's like I was still working out the show at the 7 o'clock show. I was still like working out jokes. But I think I had one line that just like, yeah, I had some lines that just, I was working them out on stage. And some of those jokes came out of a show I did in Edinburgh that I was going to tape before COVID. And then a lot of them came out of just being pregnant and like, you know, tweeting something or thinking about going into a maternity store and seeing that they had boyfriend jeans. And that was funny to me. And I was like, why is this funny? And I made a joke about it.
So we're always telling our listeners, like, make art, be creative, do something. What advice would you give someone? Because we have people of all ages listening.
I would say relax. We don't need more comedians. Use your time to focus on climate change and capturing carbon. No, I do think consuming art, producing art can be cathartic and can be therapeutic if that's what you are compelled to do. People have told me recently about certain things like, oh, like write a show about that. It's what I found works for me, but I don't want to tell any more people to be comedians because
it's like a giant diesel truck. We don't need another one on the road.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's good to know. I've never talked to you about this, but the process of working on Borat, because Borat came out in the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And so I never got to chat with you about this. What was that like? I mean, I know people that have worked with Sacha Baron Cohen, and they felt that the whole process of tricking people into talking to you and having all these things planned for them that they're not aware of could be very uncomfortable. Like what was sort of your role in that film, and how did you sort of deal with all the weird stuff that must have come up?
I mean, it was a dream job. It was a dream. And I think one of my favorite scenes is a pregnancy crisis center, which was a pitch of mine. And I remember I was in a room with Sacha and a bunch of guy comics and talking about pregnancy crisis centers and how I remember, I think like the joke about like, oh, if she swallows a baby and it's like a plastic baby on a cupcake, but then they go to the fake abortion clinic and they say, oh, there's a baby inside her and it's mine. And I forget who it was, but they were like, there's no way that a person there would ever be okay with incest or something, with the idea of incest. And I told them, no, these places would be totally okay with it. And then we shot it and everybody was just like jaw dropped just with what footage that we got. And you can see it if you see the movie. And I will tell you this, but I helped produce that segment. And in terms of moral compass, where your moral compass is when you're doing a piece like this, I can't get into too much about how the sausage is made, but there's this moment where I was like, are we going to get in trouble for this? And then I thought, like, what would the news headline be? Comedians prank people who trick vulnerable pregnant people. And so I just was like, fine, we'll go to town. Let's get the shot. But I think it depends on who your target is. And if your target is a fake abortion clinic that misleads vulnerable people, then go for it. I think all the work that I do, I try to make sure that my target's in the right spot. It was the same thing with the Daily Show. The idea of, oh, are we making fun of people, or are we shining a light on people in power and their hypocrisies? I think, again, if the target is worth it, comedy can be a great tool. Public shame can be a great tool. I think people like Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and Ron DeSantis should never, and Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham and Josh Hawley and did I say Ted Cruz? Yeah. should never like enjoy a meal at a nice restaurant without the fear of there being spit in it. Like, I think they should never be able to sit at a restaurant without somebody going up to them and yelling at them, and maybe us getting to see that video on TikTok. That's not the same thing as comedy, but I do think teasing or shaming people in power is great, and it's peaceful and it's effective.
And we need more of it.
And
so Trump is running again, which is, thank you, Merrick Garland. What do you think about, even if it's not him, if it's DeSantis in 2024, like this Republican Party, they're here to stay. They wanted to have an extreme Republican Party and they built one. They've been working towards this for such a long time and they're locked in thanks to extreme gerrymandering. Like this is it. This is who we're stuck with. What advice do you have for the rest of us? What advice are you going to cling to in the years ahead for us to carry on, to confront this, to sustain our emotional, mental bandwidth and confronting corruption and calling out corruption and hypocrisy?
I mean, I'm parroting what you say if we just have to keep voting and phone banking and just getting people to give a shit. I think comedy can help with that. It can help galvanize people and again expose people to issues they might not be thinking about. There was a lot of talk about like the role of the Daily Show and getting Trump elected or political comedians, yada, yada, yada. I mean, I don't have answers, but I do know that there's so few people you can trust. But I trust a lot of comedians, left of center comedians who deliver the news. I know that when I worked at the Daily Show, we were not beholden to anyone. We did a segment on fast food worker strikes, and McDonald's was a sponsor of ours, and no one ever told us what we couldn't do. And so I do think people who maybe work at CNN or MSNBC or other news outlets might be beholden to higher powers, but I know a lot of the comedians, like I'm pretty sure nobody censors John Oliver and no one censored Jon Stewart, and I'm pretty sure no one censors Sam B. And so just on that fact alone, comedians are or can be a trusted news source. Now, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think in this current moment, you're seeing a lot of people like Joe Rogan having huge platforms and disseminating false information. And, so I don't want to say trust all comedians, but I think comedians, I think it's, I don't even know if I'm answering your question, but I always felt like comedians are kind of like the canary in the coal mine of democracy. Once we start getting arrested or getting censored, then you really know that your democratic system is fucked. And you can look at it in other countries around the world, how comedians have fared there and how they continue to fare there. Comedians are a sign of a healthy democracy, and we're part of it. And continue to support comedians, I guess I would say, not to be self-interested, but just like hold your comedians close and continue to support them, because in a lot of like fascist regimes, they don't exist in the way that they do now. Healthy discussions without censorship are critical to democratic health.
When Putin first came to power, a popular Saturday Night Live style sketch comedy show in Russia that used to make fun of him went away, right? That was Putin. He got rid of the comics. They were like some of the first to go. And then he starts murdering the journalists and then the ethnic minorities and so on. So when you and I were teenagers, I think it was around the time we were teenagers, maybe in college, Christopher Hitchens in Vanity Fair came out with a straight-faced essay with the thesis, Women are not funny. That happened in our lifetime when you and I were trying to figure out our own voice in this world and find our way in the world. And this is who was commanding thought leadership. How has being a female comic, how has being a woman producer, creator, how has that changed for you as you've gone up, up, up in the world? Because you keep going up, and it's wonderful to see. It's heartening to see. I remember the very first time I met you was a million years ago. I think it was like 2010 or 2011 at a salon gathering. It was at a party. It was like a Molly Crabapple party, and I remember like you and I were just talking alone in a corner, and you were like telling me these rumors about this comedian Louis C.K. masturbating in front of people. And it was like classic whispering campaign by women to women trying to like, protect each other. By the way, if you're ever thinking of pitching Louis C.K. for anything, don't, because he will masturbate in front of you. And it's crazy because we were young things trying to make it in New York City with these big, crazy dreams. And I did happen to meet Louis C.K. Like, my paths did cross with him. We're out in public with a bunch of people present, so nothing happened. But you know what I mean? It's like that just goes to show.
Well, as much as he was masturbating and whatever, he still was like better than other guy comics that I, have encountered. And I think he gets a disproportionate amount of shit. I don't know if you can hear my little kid crying in the background. Daddy's got you. But he, I'm not defending Louis by any means, but a friend of mine, and I write about this in my forthcoming book as well. I write a little bit about this, but a friend basically said, we were swimming in a toilet, and Louis' peccadillos, sex crimes, whatever you want to call them, are out in the open now. But there were so many people that were worse than him and that still exist and are thriving. And then I'm not going to name names, but it's just like, and by Louis, you mean Grammy winner and current Grammy nominee. It was a tough world. It was so much easier for us than it was for the generation before us. I think about all those actresses in the 90s who had to deal with the Harveys and the whatever. And then I try to be optimistic about the one thing I'll say is that the one thing, but from when I got into comedy in 2005 to now, the amount of progress in this one pocket of our culture is really heartening. There are more women in comedy. There are more non-binary people in comedy. There are more marginalized people getting paid to do comedy, building incredible careers. I do believe that there has been an immense amount of progress in this one lane that I've been in for 15 or 16 years now.
Thank God. Okay, Jena, tell us, where can we get your comedy special, Lady Killer, and your new book, Not Funny, Jena Friedman, but that's not out. Academy Award nominated screenwriter on the cover. That doesn't come out until April, I thought.
April. Yeah, okay, that'll come out in April.
Okay. And the book's called Not Funny.
The book is called Not Funny. It's just about the past 15 or so years of stories about being in comedy and art culture. There's an essay about, there's a chapter about dead baby jokes. It was fun to write. And so that comes out in April. As you mentioned, my stand-up special, Lady Killer, is out on Peacock. I have another special that came out right before the 2016 election called American Cunt. I think that's out on Spotify. I don't know where that is, and I don't know if I even get any residuals if you buy it, but there's some good abortion jokes that I also posted on YouTube. And then the true crime show is called Indefensible. That is streaming on AMC Plus, and it's every Thursday at 10/9 Central on Sundance TV.
Thank you so very much, Jena Friedman, mom, wonderful mom.
I can't wait to have you meet him and to see you in Brooklyn or in LA if you guys come out here. It's been too long.
Yeah, we'll arrange a marriage with my kid, my baby. So thank you so much, Jena Friedman, tenacious comic, social critic, Oscar-nominated producer, filmmaker, screenwriter, and Gaslit Nation listener. Thank you so much.
Fan.
Thank you. Love you. I'm grateful for you and you hanging in there and fighting the good fight for all of us. Our discussion continues, and you can get access to that by signing up on our Patreon at the Truth Teller level or higher.
Pakistan has been decimated by record floods, and people need help. To help victims of the floods, donate to Pakistan Emergency Flood Aid at www.launchgood.com/campaign/Pakistan_emergency_flood_aid. Climate and economic crises are everywhere, so continue supporting your local food bank as well.
We encourage you to help support Ukraine by donating to Rozum for Ukraine at rozumforukraine.org. We also encourage you to donate to the International Rescue Committee, a humanitarian relief organization helping refugees from Syria, Ukraine, and Afghanistan. Donate at rescue.org. And if you want to help critically endangered orangutans already under pressure from the palm oil industry, donate to the Orangutan Project at theorangutanproject.org. Gaslit Nation is produced by Sarah Kenzier and Andrea Chalupa. If you like what we do, leave us a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more listeners. And check out our Patreon. It keeps us going.
Our production manager is Nicholas Torres, and our associate producer is Carlin Daigle. Our episodes are edited by Nicholas Torres, and our Patreon exclusive content is edited by Carlin Daigle.
Original music in Gaslit Nation is produced by David Whitehead, Martin Bissenberg, Nick Farr, Damian Arriaga, and Carlin Daigle.
Our logo design was donated to us by Hamish Smith of the New York-based firm Order. Thank you so much, Hamish.
Gaslit Nation would like to thank our supporters at the producer level on Patreon and higher: Jess Sauer,
Chick Quinn,
Lily Wachowski,
Sean Rubin,
Todd Pearlstein,
Kenny Main,
John Schoenthaler,
Ellen McGirt,
Joel Farron,
Larry Gasson,
Erica Moore,
Karen A. Deal,
Nico Phillips,
Brian E. Castor,
Tatiana Birch,
Karen Heisler,
Ann Bertino,
Chris Bravo,
T.R. Dunstan,
John Millett,
David East,
Stu,
Ida,
Ben Wheaton,
Joseph Mara Jr.,
Rich Holcomb,
Thomas Scheibe,
Kelsey Malsom,
Julie Matthews,
Meganopolis,
Barbara Kittredge,
Matthew Womack,
Silas Frank,
Sean Berg,
Kristen Custer,
Tracy Ash,
Kai Gillis,
Sharon Hattrick,
Ed Snowden's Russian passport,
William Barry Reeves,
Richard Smith,
Emmy,
Kevin Gannon,
Mike Christensen,
Sandra Collins,
Katie Masuris,
John Laughlin,
James D. Leonard,
Leo Chalupa,
Carol Golstad,
Michael Woldridge,
Jason Benke,
Marcus J. Trent,
Joe Darcy,
Ann Marshall,
Jeremy Lewis,
Joel Newman,
Trigvi,
D.L. Singfield,
Matt Perez,
Nicole Spear,
Brian Tajuden,
Maureen Murphy,
Abby Road,
Jans Alstrup Rasmussen,
Victoria Olson,
Z.W.,
Lisa LaFlame,
Kathy Kavanaugh,
Sarah Gray,
Mike Tripico,
Diana Gallagher,
Jennifer Ann Luter,
John Ripley,
Ethan Mann,
David Porter,
Kate Cotton,
Leah Campbell,
Lynn Schneider,
Jared Lombardo,
Karen Humphreys,
Ann Marshall.
and Tanya Chalupa. Thank you all for your support of the show. We could not make Gaslit Nation without you.
Thank you.